you said about being glad Chuck was gone. When you got to get up and give your talk in 2004, I went out to Kansas, Harper County, Sumner County, with Gene Roden, and saw a bunch of tornadoes in one day. And the next year, someone asked me to speak at the Mississippi State Conference, and I had my little presentation, and I was so excited about it. And I walked up on the stage, and I looked down, and Chuck was in the front row. And I didn't know him. He didn't really know me from Adam at that point, but I thought, everything I'm going to say, this man is absolutely going to tear it.
And I think one of the things is that Chuck was one of the things that's different about Chuck and I is that I don't necessarily process during people's talks as fast as Chuck does. I mean, Chuck, he could put everything together and go, here's a good question. And he really wouldn't mean it as much, but that was just his way of, it was probably worse if he didn't get a question from Chuck. Because at that point, he didn't think you were worthwhile interacting with and developing. I did take advantage of it once for that. When I did the talk on how I was starting to do signal detection theory to look at tornado warning performance, I knew Chuck would have a question, and I knew Chuck's hand would be up first. And so I had added a slide at the end of the talk. And so I get done with the talk, and the Chuck raises his, and I said, Chuck, and I said, wait a minute, I forgot one more slide. And I don't know if you've ever seen the despair.com, the motivators posters that have phrases like, it's always dark, it's just before it gets pitch black. Those kinds of things. Well, there was this one, it was called cluelessness. And there are no stupid questions, but there are a lot of inquisitive ones. And so that's right, yes. And so I said, and so I put that up and I said, Chuck, your question, Chuck? And he just looked at me with, and he knew that I knew it was going to happen, and that I had planned that slide just for him. And it was a special relationship. But yeah,
and I'm loving these stories because now I do feel like I'm getting a chance to know him a lot more. But it was neat to go back and listen to these clips. The first one, James, if you want to play it, this is you tossing a question to Chuck about the false alarm rate. You were talking about it 15 years ago.
Nothing has changed. Literally, the first show we did, I talked about FAR in 2006. Let's go back and listen to episode 197. Chuck, the false alarm ratio at tornado warnings in some of the Weather Service offices is up in the 85 to 90% range. Do you think that is acceptable, and how do we improve that?
Well, that's a real interesting question. I'd say some offices have a tendency to play a CYA game.
Yep.
And that's not necessarily the same in all offices. But there are certain tendencies that these offices have to overwarn just to be on the safe side. And, I don't support that. But if you really want that to be changed, that has to be a decision that in effect is forced on them from above. Because that's generally an office policy that's set by the local staff. And the only way you're going to get them to change it is
in 1 mile. Continue on I-35 south.
So it seems like the emphasis with a lot of the Weather Service offices, it's POD instead of FAR.
Yeah, well, let's look at it this way. Nobody dies in a false alarm. False?
Continue on I-35 south.
Nobody dies in a false alarm. False alarms don't kill anybody.
Continue straight for 1 hour and 20 minutes to exit 265, State Highway 130 toll south towards San Antonio.
False alarms don't kill anybody. And if you happen to not have a warning out, because you're playing it conservative and some weird tornado happens and by bad luck someone ends up being killed by it, that basically your ass is grass, and somebody's going to be the lawnmower. So there's kind of an unwritten policy that we're going to forgive false alarms a lot more readily than we're going to forgive failures to detect, and especially when something bad happens.
Wow. He makes good points. He makes great points. Recognize that voice, Harold?
And not subtly either.
Yeah. I tell you, and one of the things that I for a number of years there was a flash flood forecaster's course taught at the National Weather Service Training Center. It was 2 weeks long, and there were 2 days taught by the lab component, and it had been Bob Maddox and Charlie Chappell that started it. When Bob came to Norman, it became Norman did it. The NSSL did it, and Don Burgess did it a couple of times, and then Chuck started doing it, and we decided we needed to revamp it. And Chuck decided to start doing that after I got to the lab, and so I got dragged into redoing those 2 days. And I think this was, and James, I think this comes back to probably why Chuck liked you. Okay, it comes back to this is that they would hear on the 8 days that the lab people didn't come, they'd get magic number kind of forecasted. If look at this thing, and if it's 8, flash flood. It's 12 now. Oh, that's even worse. And we would go in, and actually the first thing we would do, and I taught it. Chuck handed it completely over to me first. Go in and we'd ask all the we had 24 students in the class. We'd ask them, how many of you worked a killer flash flood? And we'd go through you pull it up, you find out that most guys on shift would get 1 or 2 of them in their career. And we would point out to them, that means you got to get it right the very first time. And you may not ever get to repeat that chance again. And if you haven't done everything in your power, forecasting-wise, to do that, how are you going to feel if somebody dies? And you can see the looks on everybody's faces. Oh man, that's God. And then at the end of the class, we did the thing where we Chuck and I put this together. We had 6 teams of 4 forecasters that were going to make probability of so much rain, exceeding some high level, and what's the maximum amount of rain you're going to find on the day. And we have 2 teams working on the same case. And the first day they get up there, and the first 2 teams present, they've got 70% chance it'll exceed 3 inches, and likely 8 inches is the maximum amount. And we pull out the observed map, and it's 1400ths of an inch. Nothing happened today. And they're all just like, oh, that's not fair. That's not fair. We go, but you're actually forecasting. What's going to happen today? This isn't like undergraduate. Your synoptic lab. We just had a couple lectures about snow. There's going to be snow happening on your lab. And you can see then the next 2 teams. Because we actually had 3 consecutive days, and the next you can see them all of a sudden go down. So we get down to low probability. It's going to take it's 9 inches that day. And the big point was, the really big days look a lot like ordinary days. And I think one of the things that comes back to the stuff you talked about at the beginning, actually, with the local TV stuff. One of the real challenges we face is when we start to. I think one of the things that Chuck and I bonded over science-wise, we cared about what's the role of the human being in forecasting. And if human beings stop doing things and we start taking away what they do and reduce their involvement because we're going to trust the models or whatever all the time, and people stop doing those things, they start losing their experience, and they stop recognizing today is the biggest day of my career. James, I know you. We've talked about April 27, 2011, and what went on. And you did everything you possibly could, and I know that. Yeah. But and how do you feel about it anyway? And that's the kind of thing. But if you'd gone in that day or that whole week and just gone, hey, it's a big day today. You would probably feel a whole lot worse if you didn't think you had given an effort to do it. And I think that was always one of the things we wanted out of Chuck. And we try to get the forecasters to think, man, you have to work hard on the ordinary days because they're not that different than the biggest days. And if you haven't done that work, you aren't going to be ready to recognize this is the. And we had a friend at a local forecast office. I won't mention where. Had a big day back in the 1980s before it was easy to look at radar from other offices. And he'd done everything right. He had nailed the forecast. And then he realizes they aren't getting reports in severe storms reports from the office next door. Maybe I've done something wrong. Maybe I've done. I don't know what's going on. And the first, so I'm going to wait till I get a report before I put a warning out. And the first report he gets is from a highway patrol officer right on the edge of his county warning area, the half-mile wide tornado on the ground moving northeast of 60 miles an hour just southwest of a small town. And he says, I knew, officially the warning was out before the tornado hit the town. I also knew nobody knew about it. He says, every morning when I shave, I look at myself in the mirror and I think about that day, and I know I never get to do it again. And we would tell that story, and Chuck was like, it was like, yeah, we're trying to.
Watch out. Vehicle on shoulder ahead.
Nobody dies in a false alarm. False alarms don't kill anybody. And if you happen to not have a warning out because you're playing it conservative and some weird tornado happens and by bad luck someone ends up being killed by it and you didn't have a warning out.
So the second one, Bill asked Chuck about advice for students because he was going to do a talk at the College of DuPage.
Now you're going to be at the College of DuPage next week or later this week, is that
I'm
right?
headed Thursday morning.
And what's going to be your advice for those young meteorologists up in Chicago?
Well, it's pretty much the same advice that I give young meteorologists everywhere. My presentation is going to be on the history of severe storms forecasting and research, basically. And there's one theme that comes through my understanding of that history, and that is that individual people can make a difference. And if you look at the history, there's been a clash of wills, and somebody in that clash, somebody wins. And if you're willing to fight for what you believe in and work hard to try to make something good happen as a result of what you believe in, then the possibility that you can make a difference is there. So my advice to them is don't ever give up and don't ever let anybody steal your dream.
All right, let's go to number 3, Jim, while we got the audio board up.
All right, number 3, he tells a story about his hat.
Oh, yeah. I think the important question is, what's the story behind the hat?
Yeah, it's become my trademark, and the story behind it is that back when I was working in Kansas City, my hair was starting to get kind of thin. I knew I was going to have to wear a hat to keep the top of my head from burning in the sun. And my wife suggested, she says, well, you're a pretty tall guy. You could probably wear a cowboy hat. Because I would have never dreamed of doing that. And so she went out and bought my first cowboy hat. And I started wearing it, and one of the things that happened with it that I noticed right away was that when I was wearing it, people who wanted to find me could find me easily in a crowd. And at the same time, the people who wanted to avoid me could easily avoid me. So that seemed like a pretty good deal to me. And so I've kept it as a trademark, and every time I don't wear it, as Tim recently mentioned, I get a lot of grief about not wearing it. And so, I get questions like, do you wear it in bed and, in the shower and whatever? But I'm sure many people would be disappointed. I don't even wear it storm chasing. It's not exactly very practical when you're out on a storm chase. It's a good way to lose it.
Yeah.
But it has become a trademark, and people expect it. But you have my wife to thank for it.
Now we know the rest of the story.
I just wanted to say one thing that, Kim as a student met Chuck. And I think one of the things that I was next door to Chuck for a long time, and I think Chuck was a difficult advisor just because of his approach to the academic system. And because he basically expected you to work as hard as he had. Which, let's be honest, that's not very easy to do. But he was an absolute wonderful non-advisor to students, non-official advisor. If a student, because he cared about people who wanted to do things. And when it was just, hey, I'm going to talk to you because you seem interested in doing good work. He was fabulous. And he was a much better resource for that than he was as an official advisor, from my perspective. Because he was, anything he could do to help that next generation move forward was he would do it without any. I'm sort of on the old end of that next generation as I think about it. But he wanted students to think there was and we saw the thing you heard from the College of Asia. He wanted students to think there was a future and that they had a role in it.
He did, and he was, demanding in that, but it was because he wanted you to succeed and to do great things, because you had a dream, and this is what was necessary to actually achieve it. It wasn't just going to happen, like, just happen into the influence of the dream that you have. I'll tell a funny story about Chuck. So I think he did, I met him in 2004 as a summer RE student. I was Harold and Dan Sutter's summer student. And Chuck also participated in the RE program, and he came to all of our talks. He really appreciated my work because it was economics-based, and he was, like you said, Harold, really interested in the impacts piece. So later on, when I was applying to graduate programs, he was happy to sit down with me and talk things through. I came to OU for their Visiting Students Weekend, and I remember sitting down, he had a big glass of wine, and we were with all these graduate students and all their potential advisors and everything. And I went off with Chuck. In part one, I was looking forward to that. But Harold would come to know quite well in me before it was named as a syndrome. So he sat down with me and told me, the thing is, when you get to those classes, just, you shouldn't worry too much about those exams. Like if you're studying properly through the whole semester and you're really taking in the material, we have to know everything. Like Harold was saying, we have to know everything to do this job well. So don't set your standards low. You're interdisciplinary, but that doesn't mean you don't have to know everything. But find that person in the class who is asking all the questions and sit down with them and say, I want to study with you. And study with them and have all the notes memorized, like be able to, from memory, have everything, and then going to the exam should have. So I went into my dynamics class the first day. I ultimately did accept going to OU, and there was one guy sitting in the front row that had like duct taped up 5-star binder on, looked like he'd seen some things, and he asked like 6 questions on tensor notation, and I was like, this is my man, this is my guy, this is my Chuck informed guy, and that person was Ariel Common, who is now the MIC of the forecast office in Los Angeles. And if you've seen any weather news of late, the last 2 weeks, he's been on every national, international news, thing covering the Los Angeles fires and doing an absolutely remarkable job with all of that. I'm so grateful that Los Angeles has someone like him. But my friendship with Ariel has been very long. It is very deep. He was one of the groomsmen in my wedding, and it all started from Chuck encouraging me to be his friend and look for that person. And in our friendship, Ariel's one of those people like Chuck who is very, very, very perfectionistic, especially early in his graduate days, very, very comprehensive. And no human could keep up with him. I used to pretend to compete with him, but I couldn't really. And I think I brought humanity, it's in friendship. And in there, we had a very wonderful relationship that it wouldn't have happened without Chuck. And I told Ariel I was going to share that tonight. He's been that inspiration when he was just that intense. Harold, you've taken your mic down. You had so many things flash across your face.
Well, so Ariel ended up being my PhD student. I was his advisor, and Ariel is actually responsible for a rule in the department in the School of Meteorology about the length that's allowed to write your journal exam response. It's not supposed to be more than 25 pages now because Ariel wrote 125 and apologized he hadn't covered everything. And so, but I get it. And something else that Chuck would tell you if you were a student was, don't give me any excuse about that. I didn't have a good professor. It's your job to learn the material. And whether you have a good professor or not, if your success depends on having a never-ending string of good teachers and good professors, you're not going to go very far. Whether you had a good professor or not, you were supposed to learn this stuff anyway.
Right. Yep. You have to find a way, and often your peers are going to be that way. James Adelot, you have mentioned that you have had some exposure to him. I think you wished you could have, interacted with him more, but even yet, just the wisdom he shared, because he was a prolific writer. He was present in spaces in a very, everywhere he was a very profound in person. And then once social media was born, boy, did he have a lot of things to share. He had a whole bevy of essays to inform the world with. Share your experience of Chuck.
When you see Chuck at conferences, when I finally got to a TV station that would send me to those, I don't think it's too small to say bigger than life at all, because you would see the cowboy hat come in the door, and this hush would come through the whole conference hall. And I remember the first time I was at a conference and saw Chuck, I said, I've got to muster up all my courage and go say hello to him. I'm just a TV guy in Tulsa, and I just want to tell him how much he's meant to me, just reading some of those papers and not understanding half of it at the time, and probably still don't. And once, and you already said bullshit, so I can say it again. Once he realized you weren't full of bullshit, he was so gracious and kind and wise and sharing. And it's like James said, that once he realized that your motives weren't full of that emoji, that he was so just generous. He was such a kind-hearted man once he realized you weren't full of it. And to hear Harold say, a bad professor does not excuse you from not learning material. Yes, I can hear it. Everything. It's just that don't make dumb excuses. And that's that'll go back into my picture of the week that we talk about, because it's both funny and it's totally on point for Dr. Doswell, because it's just, don't be lazy. No excuses. Do this the right way. And what you said earlier too, and it gets a little bit away from him, but on to this current generation of scientists in this. And I mean, we realize that we're riding the coattails of these titans that in the science, and that's an enormous responsibility. And I hope everyone in the current generation understands just where we were when Dr. Doswell's generation started and where they left the science for us. And gosh, that's intimidating. And you all have triggered every ounce of imposter syndrome. And I'm so glad I didn't go to grad school in meteorology and pick something that I could write instead of math. So.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, James.
I got to share a picture here. I think you guys can see that. Kim, do you recognize that place?
Oh, I sure do. I was in the room for this. This is the National Weather Center, room 1313, the big hall.
Yes, and so we did the show live from that room, and notice I don't know who lined up the people here, but notice that we got me and Chuck down there by ourselves on the end, and that's trouble. I mean, I tell you right now, that's trouble. I mean, he can totally whip me into a frenzy. And this poor young girl down there, this college student, came up and she got on the mic and she just wanted to talk to us a little bit, maybe get some advice. And Chuck just lit into it, and he got me into it. We both we said the right things, but we didn't say it in the proper way, if that makes any sense. And it was over. I felt so bad. And her name is Elise Smith, and literally about 3 months after this, I was here in my little closet. And I looked out in the hall, and there she was in the hall right there. I'm thinking, oh, she's come back to haunt me or something. What is this? And as it turned out, she actually interned here that summer. And she has gone on to have an amazing career at Buffalo. Now she's with the ABC affiliate in Houston, Texas. But in fact, it's going to be, I'll tell you now, that's going to be my pick of the week. It's that episode. You can go back and watch the replay of that. We were the two troublemakers in the room in the class. When they put Chuck and I together, trouble. That was it. But I apologize profusely to Elise, and she's accepted that, and we're buddies now, so that's good.
You know, something that you've raised, and maybe Harold can expand on it. Chuck could be a difficult individual. He sometimes, you've mentioned it, you know, offhandedly a little bit, but there were things he took some pleasure in rallying against directly, like bureaucratic institutions.
Oh gosh, I said overrunning. I said overrunning one night. That
you said triggered. It would have triggered him.
He couldn't drive. You couldn't drive a 10-penny nail up his backside with a sledgehammer. I mean, he reamed me out, and I will never, ever. I think that's the first time I've uttered that word in public since he reamed me out.
I think that one of the things that Chuck had what I would view as a healthy respect for management, which means basically none. And I remember him once a year, you know, he would bring up the question, because one of the great philosophical questions within NOAA is, you know, which management is worse, Weather Service management or OAR, the research management? And he would start off on this thing and say, I finally have decided that, you know, the Weather Service is worse because OAR management basically just ignores you and doesn't actually care. They don't do anything. Whereas the Weather Service will actively try to screw things up. And it's just like, okay, there's a thing. Yeah. So he, and he just, he did. I mean, I think a lot of this was, you know, Chuck cared about what the real mission was, which was science. And the only good manager was one who just essentially didn't get in the way of doing science. And that was his thing, because he would say, you know, you look around at Weather Service offices and you'll see some places that you have some managers who are, if it's not specifically stated in the rules, we don't do it. And other managers who would say, if it's not specifically stated in the rules that we don't do it, go ahead and do whatever you want to do. And says if we get in trouble, we'll deal with it. And that was sort of his thing of looking for places and looking for people who were willing to help people try to do something interesting and high quality. And if you would support doing that quality stuff, Chuck loved you. If you got in the way of doing quality, Chuck would not be particularly nice to you, and he didn't care whether you thought it was polite or not.
Is this why, you know, when you look back at Chuck's career, he is somewhat of a, you know, not a lone gun, but he didn't, you know, rise through a bureaucratic rank of a kind as a scientist. And it's interesting to think about that he wasn't some like really big Fed, you know, like, and the part of it is that he had this challenge of balancing the science he wanted to do with navigating the systems that produce it.
I'm gonna try to get a cat over here to see if I can compete with your dog. But I think one of these. I mean, for a few years he was head of the Medscale Applications Group when he first started, which was the group that ended up doing a lot of work here at the lab with SBC. And that was when it was just like 3 or 4 of us. And being head of our group was pretty much just everybody do what they want to do and, you know, do good stuff. And then it was actually they named Joe Schaefer as the director, and he knew he couldn't work with Joe, and that person was going to have to work with Joe a lot. So he came to me and said, "I'm not going to be the head anymore. I told Maddox to make you the head." And that was because he didn't want to do management work. And maybe that's why I picked some of that up. I mean, I was happy doing management when it was let's try to do science, and then when it became much more of, well, you got to manage budget. I didn't want to do that anymore, and I don't think that's a good use of my whatever talents I have to do budget. If someone wants to talk to me about an exciting science topic, man, I'm talking to you. But if you want to talk about, it's $18,000 to do this and $17,000 to do this, which one are you going to do? It's like, I don't care. You don't do that. I mean, I refuse to be on our budget committee at church because I hate budget so much. Okay? And that was, and it's the same kind of thing. I just want to, you want to talk about what we're doing programmatically? Fine, I'll talk about that, but I want to talk about budget. And that's Chuck. It was like he didn't want to do that, and that limits you in Noah. I mean, Chuck's attitude towards management is possible it cost him a promotion because there were management people who didn't like him. But I think he was okay living with that.
Sorry, everyone who gets to watch on YouTube is watching the dog chew my hair. Puppy. Oh my word! I'm keeping the dog away from the sleeping children. This is the marital balance we've struck this evening. But yeah, I for better and worse, probably I've always been so inspired by Chuck's forthrightness, and I think I've always been the same. And I as much as he could be difficult, you knew exactly what he was thinking. You knew exactly where you stood, and I prefer that to the small p politics any day, any day. I share his, I won't say disdain for that level of politics, but it's just when we're a science agency with a science mission, it's something that I think we all have to navigate within ourselves. What degree do we want to deal with each of these issues, whether separately or conjoined? And he very much fell on that side, and I myself take the view that the best science policy is going to come from the best science. And much like him, I am very forthright. And there are some who find that very endearing. They love knowing exactly what I'm thinking, and some who less relish it. But I think I can see my career taking some of the same, the same consequences. But I would rather that. And seeing the outpouring of love that he's had, come forward in the last 2 days, he used.
Police reported ahead.
That I later got from the European Conference on Severe Storms, and that's been one of the groups I've really liked hearing from over the last couple of days, or all of our.
Police reported ahead.
The last couple of days, or all of our mutual friends that Chuck and I for a long time were, I've been to all of the European conferences, he went to almost all of them, and it was like, boy.
Police reported ahead.
Almost all of them, and it was like, boy. You think he looks impressive when he walks into a conference in the U.S. Just kind of be in the vicinity when Chuck Dazzo walked into the room of one of the ECSS, what they have, because there was where you'd hear all these people who had only read and said had never seen him in person before, and all of a sudden there he is, and what he did forecaster training over there, did all kinds of work over there. Now they gave him a lot of beer in the Czech Republic. That's much.
All right, so we got to take a break, and we can carry on here all night. We have to take a quick break here. I do not have a report from Tony this week, but I've got Jen, and this week in Tornado History, we're going to come back and talk a little bit about this southern winter storm action. Blizzard Beach is going on here, but much more to come as Weather Brains rolls along.
This week in Tornado History, an outbreak of 86 tornadoes occurred on January 21st, 1999. There were 9 tornadoes rated F3, all but one in Arkansas, and there's also an F4 in the state. We have a summary at tornadotalk.com that looks at one of the F3s. This twister traveled 8 miles and 11 minutes through parts of White County, Arkansas. It developed 1 mile southwest of Beebe. The twister moved northeast through the town, causing tremendous damage. The new Beebe Junior High School on Center Street had significant damage. The walls and roof collapsed in classrooms. A gym behind the school was demolished. After hearing of the approaching severe weather, a girls' basketball game was canceled at halftime, and the upcoming boys' game was called off. The tornado destroyed the gym a half hour later, and the building was empty. Damage occurred to the Beebe Fire Department and a church. 2 pickup trucks were flipped upside down on Hickory Street, and many old houses on Main Street were damaged or destroyed. The tornado left Beebe and moved toward McRae. Downed trees and building debris was found along Highway 367 between the two towns. In McRae, the old fire station lost a wall, and the new fire station was destroyed. Several mobile homes were overturned at that new fire station. The post office sustained heavy damage. All natural gas in town was shut off due to leaks. The tornado dissipated about 1 mile northeast of McRae. At least 29 injuries occurred from this event, and sadly there were 2 fatalities in Beebe. 2-month-old Kirk McAfee and Flo Taylor, age 50.
Hey.
Watch out. Vehicle on shoulder ahead.
2-month-old Kirk McAfee and Flo Taylor, age 50.
Hey. Just maybe we have a little email in the inbox tonight.
Alrighty, we did get some email this week. I want to thank those who sent a couple of YouTube videos. One was of a Guatemalan volcano, and then also YouTube, a meteorite strike on a home security camera. So thank you for those that came in. And we also had a question that came in this evening about reliable platform sources. So there's been a cause of concern regarding reliable platform sources like Instagram, X, Facebook, Twitch, TikTok, because some people like to overhype certain events. And the question is, which one is the more reliable platform? And I thought, James, you could take this because I think it's a combination. There's the platform, and then there's the person behind the keyboard who's giving you the information on the platform, because you're on all the platforms and you are a reliable source. So how would you answer that?
Well, I don't know. Listen, I know enough about social media to be dangerous. But having said that, half of it's the algorithm. Most people are not going to go to your profile, your Facebook page, or TikTok channel. They're just going to see what's in their feed. So the question is, how is the algorithm distributing that information to you? And it's different for every platform. And the problem is the algorithm changes almost every day, and you can't keep up with it. So all you can do is just try and put it out there, engage with people. If they ask questions, answer them, and be responsive, and be there consistently, and be there when people need you, whether it's Saturday morning at 5 or Tuesday night at 9. And I think as they consume more of your products, it shows up more in the algorithm. I see more of this. But in terms of reliability, it's all a matter of the individual or the entity. But it just seems to me that Facebook is still probably the first place I would go if I was on the socials trying to find some weather information. Just my opinion.
Excellent. Thank you, James. Thank you for your emails. Email at weatherbrains.com. Get those to us, and make sure you put your name and your email address so we can get back to you if we're not able to get to you on the show. Back to you, James.
So we have winter storm warnings in effect tonight, all the way from the southern tip of Texas to Charleston, South Carolina, Houston, Lake Charles, New Orleans, Mobile, Pensacola. Goodness gracious. And I wish Troy was here because we could kind of go to our Texas correspondent and see how things are unfolding out there. But it looks like there might be a few spots in there that could pick up 3, 4, 5 inches of snow at very low latitudes. So obviously that's the talk of the community around here tonight. Could we have snow on the beach at Gulf Shores, or Walton Beach, Panama City Beach, Galveston? Pretty good chance. We'll find out. This is a case where it's going to be very interesting to see what the atmosphere delivers. But that's obviously the big thing. The other big thing is the cold. We talked about that. It's all your fault, Jen, for leaving the back door open. So thank you for doing that. So again, we're going to go around the horn here and do picks of the week. This is where everybody's going to share something that is weather related. I'll just start with mine. And again, it was the classic live show we did in Norman. This was episode number 509. This was on the 29th of October, 2015. And I want to say that was probably during the National Weather Association annual meeting, if you're just looking at the time here. But episode 509, we had just all kind of folks on the show. It was an hour and 17 minutes of interesting discussion. Chuck was a panelist on that show. And again, it's just an interesting one to watch. And the show title was, I Can Give You a Finger, which was very appropriate for Chuck Gosler being on the show. So that's my pick of the week, Weather Brains episode number 509. All right, James, let's hit to you and go to you before we have to do the 9 o'clock news.
And yeah, mine is from Chuck's personal page, and you can see a lot of the blog posts on my personal page were also labeled with, I moved this off my work page. So yeah, circling back to what Errol just said. And it is his meteorological pet peeves. And I want people to look at it, but I want people to understand the mindset of listing these and why they're there. And most of them are to steer people away from lazy thinking and kind of block of wood mentality. And you said it with overrunning, because I book chat. I signed it after somebody in a conference because I learned that it doesn't describe anything. Isentropic lift describes the dynamic process.
The process.
Overrunning is a kinematic word. It doesn't tell you anything.
All right. I've heard the lecture.
How making me think.
The guy was a critical thinker. I'm telling you, he didn't care really what anybody thought about what he said. He just going to say the truth.
And he wanted everybody else to have those high standards as well, and to think, and to care. So,
right. And he wanted people to get it right. And I love that. He drove you to excellence. And then, he can be a little intimidating. But by golly, he makes you better. Yeah. Really intimidating. All right, Jen, give us a good pick of the week. What you got for us?
I wish I could, but for the first time this year, Foghorn for little old me.
Woo!
Yeah, let me hear it.
Wow.
Yeah, I think all those clips that you curated should count. Like, you count effort for this, of all of us.
We can do it. We can add those for sure.
Only to 10. Yeah, that's a fireside theater. Checking ideas with each other as well.
Exactly. All right, Kim, give us a pick of the week. Go.
All right, so my pick of the week is a very brief remembrance Ariel Cohen sent me, the MIC LA that we were just talking about. My favorite memory, and there are so many, honestly, was when he came to Columbus in 2006 for our symposium. He went out of his way to spend time with me and talk to me. I mean, the guy is a world-famous superstar, and here he is in my hometown. He was excited to see me. He wanted to catch up. I couldn't believe it. Ariel was a first-year grad.
Object on road reported
For our symposium. He went out of his way to spend time with me and talk to me. I mean, the guy is a world-famous superstar, and here he is in my hometown. He was excited to see me. He wanted to catch up. I couldn't believe it. Ariel was a first-year grad student at this point, maybe he was graduating. I felt like I mattered. I don't remember a whole lot of what he said, but it made me feel like I was worth it. I remember in advanced, this is where things get very much the relationship between Chuck and Ariel. I remember in advanced forecasting techniques, we got into a minor quarrel about lapse rates calculations. Not to be arrogant, but he eventually realized I was correct about the denominator being a fixed bulk value, and he made it a deliberate point to articulate it in front of everyone. Who else does that? The typical response is to just look good, cover it up, and bury the person of lesser power. But no, his integrity and moral conscience were to acknowledge the truth openly and admit he was appropriately corrected. I miss him so much.
Excellent. All right, Harold Brooks, give us something good, something we don't know about. Pick. This could be anything weather-related. Go.
Weather-related? Okay. So, first of all, I've got a shirt on. It's about becoming a mathematical thinker, not a calculator, which is actually a shirt we use with our math counselor, middle school math group. It's actually a chart club to me. It's about becoming a thinker, not just calculating things. But my pick of the week, I was given permission by Kim to give 2 papers, and so Jen, if you want to claim one of them, I'll got you covered. The first is the paper that we wrote that's the most cited thing I've ever been involved in. And it was flash flood forecasting and ingredients-based methodology. We introduced the concept of ingredients-based forecasting with Bobcats. I think that every time I say ingredients-based forecasting, what are the ingredients for some weather event? I'm going, dang it. What's Oswald and medicine? And then the second one is the most looked at paper I've ever, or thing I've ever written. And this was, I think, on the other side of Chuck. And it's a conference paper from the Severe Storms Conference in 1996 called Case Analysis of a Killer Tornado in Kansas on 10 June 1938. And it's our effort to talk about the Wizard of Oz tornado. And it happened that the Tom Grzoulis book of historical tornadoes had just come out. And Chuck had talked for a long time and wanted to do a conference thing on the Wizard of Oz tornado. And I'm looking through the book and it's like there's this tornado that there's most of the damage is at one farm. And there's one death in the tornado, and it's in June of 1938. So we decided that's our tornado. MGM wouldn't give us permission to get screenshots, and so Chuck set up his camera in front of his TV, paused the VCR, and take pictures of it. And at the conference, we sat the whole time. We just ran the first few minutes of the movie on and over and over again. And I think that was sort of our thing. And it turned out the weird thing is I actually have friends who are involved in the Wizard of Oz trivia community. And this exists. And it turned out what we wrote turned out to matter to them because it helped determine the number of hours of time zone difference between Kansas and Oz because we had a time for the tornado occurrence.
That's outstanding. Excellent. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, Bill Murray, you're up. Go.
Yeah, James, I'm going to use Chuck's chatter, one of his blogs, because there's some really deep posts on there. I'm going to use that as my pick of the week. It's a fascinating place to go back and read his thinking on a lot of different Yeah, we've got some great shows coming up. Next week we're going to have Jen Walton and Heath Lawler talk about chasing, and we're getting ready for Jen's. What is she calling it, Kim? It has a word. It's spring training or something to that effect. Boot camp or something like that.
Yes.
Training. It's going to be really cool. So we're excited about that. I'm hoping we can have. I've reached out to the Watch Duty folks in California for February 10th, but they're really, really busy right now. Things are still very, very crazy. So it may be a while later. And I was interested to hear you talk about Ariel tonight. Maybe he can join us for some date in the future, maybe March 3rd, Kim, or something like that. But excited about Janice Huff joining us on the 17th, and our old friend Roger Adams joining us on the 24th of February. So those are just some of the shows that are coming up, and Show 1000 is coming into focus on the 17th. I'm getting more confident about it now, and less heart palpitations every time I hear about it. So hopefully some interesting news will be coming out shortly about that show.
All right. Hey, Harold, thanks for coming on tonight. Short notice, but thank you. You're the greatest.
And thank you very much for having me. As Kim asked me if it was too soon for me, and I honestly think it was. I probably needed this as much as you guys did. This is there's outside of family, has anybody ever affected me as much in my life as Chuck Cosby? And I think mostly for the good.
Absolutely. And thank you again for those that are watching. We're new here. If you're new, we're typically on the air every Monday night, 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern. The Weather Brain YouTube channel. We'll start you listen. But again, we just hope we honored Chuck. Thanks to all of you for listening. Have a great night. God bless.
When to do it and who to hire. Start caring for your home with confidence. Download Thumbtack today. For weekend looks, you've got to check them out. CollersandCo.com. Use code Tiki for 15% off your first order.
Welcome to the Sports Media Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Deitch. My producer is Patrick Antonetti. 2 guests this week, 2 colleagues of mine at The Athletic. I am really, really psyched to do this podcast because I'm beyond fascinated by this upcoming game. We have Joe Buscaglia, who is our lead reporter covering the Buffalo Bills for The Athletic, and Nate Taylor, who is our lead reporter covering the Kansas City Chiefs. So in terms of the 2 glamour teams, I guess we'll include the Ravens too, but the 2 glamour teams in the AFC, these are the glamour gentlemen who cover these teams. And welcome Nate and Joe to the Sports Media Podcast.
I've never heard the term glamour used in front of my name, so I appreciate that wholeheartedly, Richard.
Yeah, it was. I'm very famous for shitty intros, Joe. So you've been blessed by that one. So there you go. Nate seems to be more of a fan of it, so there we go.
That was fantastic.
Thank you, Nate. All right. By the way, I'm going to start here, and I'm going to start with you, Nate, because I find this fascinating. Joe, you may know this, you may not. Nate, you started covering the Kansas City Chiefs in 2018, right?
Yes, sir.
I mean, in all honesty, this is absurd. Like, you're like one of those Boston kids who was 15 when all you knew were championships for the Patriots and the Celtics and the Red Sox. So I know your career didn't start in 2018, but my God, you essentially have covered a dynastic team ever since you walked in the door in Kansas City, and my sense is that is not lost on you.
No, not at all. Especially growing up in Kansas City. It's so great that you mentioned the analogy of Boston children, growing up, because my son has a completely different experience than I did. He has never not seen them be in the AFC Championship game. That is absurd. I remember, not that you actually really looked this up, but when I started The Athletic, perhaps the best thing I wrote in the intro, hey, why am I joining? Why should you care about coverage of the Chiefs? Is having all that information of Dave Craig, Joe Montana, but obviously in the twilight, David Heward, Tyler Palko, Alex Smith, Trent Green. I had seen all these quarterbacks, just being from my hometown, and then it's like, well, no one's gonna play like this guy. He is, otherworldly talented, and I just said that'll be perhaps the most compelling thing in 2018 for the Chiefs. Little did I know it would be the most compelling thing for the entire season, in the entire league. So yeah, I've been extremely blessed. But I think all that historical information, obviously my dad has grown up watching the team since they moved from Houston as the original Houston Texans to the Chiefs in the 1960s. So just when you think, all right, there's got to be some level of the next phase, the next chapter. They continue to reach the AFC Championship game, which continues to challenge me on how to properly report, contextualize all of this in real time. It's a blessing, but it is quite not what I expected.
Yeah, it's a challenge too. Their franchise is pretty fascinating to me, even as somebody who grew up in New York, and I'm a little older than you guys.
Police reported ahead.
I'm a little older than you guys. I actually have I kept it when I was a kid, Joe Delaney football cards. I always
how about that?
Yeah, I always loved the selfless act that he.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it cost him his life, but he was a great running back, and and for those who don't remember, you should Google him. Like, he died basically saving a kid in a pool, and he couldn't swim himself. And I remember Rick Riley, who I eventually ended up working with, wrote a very, very famous column on it. All right, so here's where I want to, in addition to obviously, Nate essentially never covering a losing season. Here's where I want to start. And I'll start with you, Joe. This podcast does a lot of process, and people really are interested when I have either broadcasters or writers or reporters or producers, like sort of what they do behind the scenes. So let's start with Thursday, okay? For you, what take me through your Thursday through Sunday leading up right before kickoff. You can go as long and as detailed as you wish. Up to you.
Yeah, the Thursday is from the Bills' perspective, because usually this late in the year they do a walk-around on Wednesdays, just to give the guys a break. But Thursdays is their big practice, which is where is my opportunity to kind of hone them up, just because I get a good 25 to 35 minutes of seeing their stretching, special teams, and individual drills, and can try and piece a puzzle together of what their game day roster might look like. And it's also a good feel. You can see what they're working on in individual drills. Like, for instance, against the Ravens, it was really interesting that the game came down to a 2-point conversion, because they were working on a lot of switching right in the goal line area between the defensive backs and safeties and everything along those lines, and to see how they played that and how they were coached it up in that week. Like, I literally stood right behind their defensive backs coach, Jamil Adai, watching this whole thing happen. So seeing that unfold was kind of cool. So that's part of it. And then I'll take everything that I kind of get from there, all my research in the week leading up. Thursday is also a big, and this is my process above all else. I watch film of the other team. I try to watch their last 2 or 3 games, and then talk with my colleague, who Nate is incredible. Him and I have talked for many times over the years, because this is the 8th time where they're going to be going up against each other in the last 5, which is also insane. And they're not division rivals. But yeah, talk to my colleagues. If I have anything that kind of perplexes me, and that'll all go into my weekly notebook, which I do projected inactives, prediction, everything along those lines. And then Friday is if I'm traveling, it's kind of like go to the locker room, babysit, talk to guys, just get things that can kind of like maybe you're thinking about heading into the game that you can go back to on Sunday to see how it all unfolds. Because usually Friday into Saturday, you're not really writing too much, just from my perspective. And then Saturday I'll fly to Kansas City, try and get a good night's sleep, and then Sunday it's on, and I'll get there to the stadium crazy early, like I always do, and just take the scene in, because the coolest thing I love about Arrowhead, and this is just being there for a lot of times over the years, and Nate can speak to this too. When you get there super early, the press box, you can see both sides of the parking lot, and watching it just fill up as the hours and minutes go is such a cool thing, especially when it's a bright sunny day, and I think it's supposed to be on Sunday, so it's a really cool thing. So that's pretty much my process near the end of the week.
Yeah, I love that. So just one thing there. I've met so many people in the business who that's their favorite part of the job is hours before game day, sitting in an empty stadium and then watching it fill up. I know, having embedded with this crew and knowing him for a long time, Jim Nantz will always take a walk around the stadium long before anybody's there, so he'll do that obviously at Arrowhead this week. And then I've talked to many people, whether it's like Joe Buck or Kevin Harlan, who they love to sit very early in whatever their booth is and then watch the stadium fill around them. They find that very peaceful, which is interesting. Nate, same question for you, and I wonder if there are if you found similarities in listening to Joe's answer as you answer this question on your own.
Yes, I do. Interestingly, Sean McDermott is a disciple third phase that people don't think about a ton. They spend a lot of time Friday on special teams. So, Thursday is usually, it's not always a guarantee, this is usually when Travis Kelce starts to become available. And for anyone, by now, he is the biggest star on the roster, which is quite the change from 2019, 2020, when Patrick Mahomes was the league MVP. So, unlike last year, Richard, we're not talking a ton about Taylor Swift, which is, I guess, a blessing to some degree. But I do know that Travis is in the twilight of his career. So anytime I get to spend with Travis, whether before podium, obviously when he does his press conference in the locker room, I'm trying to collect similarly to Joe, as much as I can, because he's only on a 2-year contract. I do not know if he'll be back next year, particularly if they are to somehow beat the Bills and somehow win the Super Bowl. So I've been working on a Kelce thing kind of all year long. So that's usually in addition to the usual Thursday, Friday routine. And it's so funny. Like Joe says, he watches film on Thursdays. I try to do it on Tuesdays. I try to do it as early as I can Tuesday, because I know Joe feels the same. These are subplots that you have to keep track of. But I love that when you get to these particular games, to Joe's point, any conversation you have with anybody could be really, really valuable towards your coverage. In the aftermath, maybe in terms of looking back on just the season as a whole. Because what I try to remind myself, and especially the readers and listeners, if they lose, that's it. That's the season. You don't have, the same locker room access when the season ends. So I do love that point about Thursday being a pretty significant part of the season within the Chiefs' pursuit of so.
I want to ask. I'm going to get back to Kelce in a second, Nate. But let me go to Joe. But Joe, probably the only person on the Bills who is in the stratosphere of Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce is Josh Allen, obviously. He speaks as the quarterbacks of all these NFL teams do in podium settings to the media. Is it conceivable for you to get any kind of one-on-one time with him? would you even put in that request, or is the league at a place where basically like the quarterbacks do what they do on the podium, and if they're going to talk to anybody, they talk to the networks and production meetings and stuff like that?
No, it's conceivable because he is an approachable guy. Like a lot of times, like, the only moments he gets to himself really are when he's in the locker room during media availability, and he's just at his locker scrolling. That's Josh's log off time. This is the only half an hour he gets. So if you want to just like have like a personal.
Watch out.
If you want to just like have like a personal connector with him, you'll talk about like a food place or something because he loves his restaurants. Let me tell you that he loves going and traveling, and he's got pretty much a place everywhere he goes. But he, it's not like he's so accessible that you're just going to get a one-on-one if you want it every single week. You have to really come with a plan and have like a distinct thing. Like, okay, I want to talk to him about this because this is what I'm kind of looking at, and because he's so overloaded with requests, and I'm sure Patrick Mahomes is the same way. He's so overloaded with requests that you just can't say yes to everything. And this is where I think there's a lot of value to being boots on the ground and being there every single day, because you build relationships not only with the quarterback but with the PR staff that knows what you're working on. They know how you are, they know how you operate, they know exactly what drives you, like and everything along. And they've read basically everything you've ever written because that's their job to do it. So if you have a request for them, that goes into the piece of it where they talk with the player and say, okay, this person wants to talk, and I know this person because I've been covering the Chiefs since 2018, and I've seen every phase of all of this. I get the sense that when I go to Travis Kelce, he knows it's not bullshit. Like, he knows in 4 minutes I can accomplish this, and he will be as attentive and expensive as he wants. If it's pretty good, I get the sense that his voice carries a lot of significance. So I don't try to use it a ton, but I think I try to have some level of conversation with Kelce during the week or post game once a month. That's usually like my goal, I guess. I remember earlier this year, the Las Vegas, they just went to trade for DeAndre Hopkins, and I essentially waited this man out, and he knew that I was waiting him out, and so we had this fun back and forth. But I got him just like taking it out to dinner, for Popeye, and just going through the season. I usually talk to Patrick one-on-one during training camp. I usually will get him at some point in the middle of the season. This year, I believe it was October. In October, he actually had a full-on sit-down with all the members of the Chiefs, and that was really good. Like, I cannot stress to him and the PR staff of the Kansas City Chiefs, like, that was a good call, because he does have so much requests, and now we have something to talk about. We're 6-7 games into the season. He can give us perspective on the offseason based on the information we now have at the beginning of October, and everyone gets a chance to sort of just like hear his perspective on a number of topics, and it was like an hour. I mean, it was wild. Again, that's the first time he's done that, but again, it kind of speaks to the amount of requests for a superstar quarterback, how you navigate that time. So I don't know if it was before the bye week, I had to look it up again, but it was really insightful. It was basically like, hey, everything's on the record, so don't even you don't have to try to like maneuver or go around a certain way. But during the playoffs, Patrick Mahomes is pretty much like, thank you, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. One quick update with since Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift have become a couple, have you had to navigate during maybe this happens post game, but maybe more than that on like practice days or off days? Like, if you had to navigate like what I would sort of consider like entertainment press or non-sport press, like within the Chiefs orbit. I know that Josh Allen, obviously Joe dates a very famous, over now his fiance, a famous woman. Well, but we're talking into a different stratosphere here, and the reality is, like, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, I don't know, TMZ or the Daily Mail or People Magazine sent some correspondent to Kansas City for whatever to try to get Travis Kelce, even if they don't get him. So I'm wondering, like, has that come up with you at all? Maybe it comes up in the Super Bowl. Like, what's that been like for you as someone who's there every day as the representative of the Athletic covering this team?
Yeah, which by the way, I mean I love the Spider-Man series, so like this is how I learned with this. I was like, oh, that's cool, like great, good for Josh, wow, amazing. Like Gwen Stacy, how about that? Her name's not Gwen Stacy, it's her character, Spider-Man. That again, my son loves. So it's like this is how I learned with Josh, his fiance. With the press involving Taylor Swift, or outside of the normal crew, it has not been as in demand as it was last year, and that's understandable because that was brand new at the time. I do remember paparazzi trying to like get as close to the team facility as I could last year, just to take photos of this man going from his car to work, and vice versa. Me and Diana Rossini, our national reporter for The Athletic, we did a story in the offseason about just the amount of attention he had to deal with in the offseason, in particular with the Eras Tour. I've never seen a man travel to more just locations just to like, be in support, for Taylor's, Megastar concert series. But no, this year, I don't think it hasn't been as noticeable. That might ratchet up the Chiefs' potential to make the Super Bowl, which makes a lot of sense. Like, I just knew on Andy Reid. They're just all available. I just remember, like, I cannot go near transcripts. Like, it's impossible. It's a waste of, for my job, for me, it's a waste of time. For you guys, I'm sure you're going to learn a lot of different things that are, more, if you try to dig more into his personal life. But yeah, it's just, now you just get familiar with, like, that person. That's a great person. Hello, Taylor. Like, it's however many, hours before the game. So we still see her quite a bit, obviously, on game days, but I don't think the attention has been quite as rapid as it was last year.
Hi there, it's Steve Thompson from the consumer team. This time of year, floor temps can get out of nowhere. And if you're dealing with a furnace issue or a breakdown, I recommend you call the On-Time Experts. They'll be at your home same day, or the service and diagnostic fee is free. And you'll love the fact that their technicians are there to fix your system. Not trying to sell you something you don't need. Go to the ontimeexperts.com and set your appointment time today. The ontimeexperts.com, the choice of the consumer team.
All right, a couple more here. Joe, people who are fans of the Chiefs may not like this comment. And again, I lived in Buffalo. I went to school, undergrad in Buffalo. And so, I have a certain bias towards wanting that city to be successful. And I follow the Bills all the time, but that's the team I'm most interested in. So I preface all that by saying, Joe, that this game, at least to me, feels much more about a story about the Buffalo Bills than about the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, the Chiefs are the standard bearer. They're the closest thing we've had to, like, a Steelers kind of dynasty back in the 70s or the 90s and the 80s. But, like, it feels like a much bigger story for the Buffalo Bills if they can overcome the Chiefs, as opposed to if the Chiefs yet again beat the Bills and go to the Super Bowl. Does that inform how you are thinking about the next couple of days, and certainly on Sunday when you have, one of the longest and probably most important days of your career?
That's so dead on, because let me just tell you, they went through, and that was the game of the week last weekend, right? Bills and Ravens, and everyone was tuned in. It's like the Sunday 6:30 game, last one of divisional round weekend, and everything along those lines. But it was a great game, and mostly everyone in that game based their coverage on what happened in that game. But about third quarter, when they were up, and it looked like they were really about to do it, they made a lot of different switches defensively, and it just this remarkable sort of thing to kind of deal with Lamar and behemoth of an offense that they have. I looked over at my colleague Tim Graham, who sits next to me at every single home game, and I'm like, I think I'm going Chiefs for my post-game game, because this is more than just a one game thing. This is unlike anything that I have seen in the NFL in a long time, with these two franchises that have been so personally intertwined and intertwined throughout the postseason. And this is going to be almost the 5th straight year that they pair up with one another. Like, when the Bills started this whole thing, like, sure, they made it to the playoffs with Josh Allen in 2019. It was only the wild card round. They lost to the Texans on the crazy Deshaun Watson play where he spins out a tackle and runs down the field. But that 2020 season, the COVID year, was really the breakout for this Bills team. They were plucky. They didn't know what they didn't know. They made it all the way to the AFC Championship game, and they got, I'm going to swear like they did since we have the go-ahead, they got their shit kicked in that game. And it's not, and the score was closer, because the final score was 38-24 in that game. But watching that game, it was never close. Like, the Chiefs were always a step ahead. Sean McDermott made some conservative decisions, specifically at the end of the first half. And Josh Allen, he was a prisoner of the moment, just a bit too much. It didn't seem too big for him, but, there were just some classic mistakes throughout that game where it's like, okay, they got there. And it's because it was so new, at that point it was like, all right, it's only a matter of time before they're back here. But it wasn't a matter of time. It has been 3 straight postseasons of them getting the door slammed in their face. First by the Chiefs in 2020, the 2021 season, the 13 seconds game, 38, having the lead with that only a couple of plays. You need one thing to go your way, and it didn't. And then the Chiefs obviously go on and move past them in that game. The year after that, it was the year that the Damar Hamlin incident happened. They were mentally exhausted, and then they met the Bengals again in that postseason, almost poetically. And the Bengals slammed the door shut. Last year, they had an opportunity to tie it late in the game against the Chiefs on their home turf. And Tyler Bass misses a kick. So they have just had this incredible story arc where they're just continuing to get to the door just to try and break through, and they haven't been able to. So as soon as the Chiefs won their game, and as soon as we got to the third quarter and it looked like the Bills were about to win, I'm just like, this is like poetry in real time right here, that they have to go back to Arrowhead and try and do the thing that they couldn't do when this whole thing started. And both these teams have been monstrous this entire 5-year stretch. The Bills have won 13 games, 3 different seasons. They only won 13 games in their franchise history two years before that whole thing started in 2000. So seeing all of this unfold real time, and then now seeing them being this much more well-schooled, no longer being prisoners of the moment, not getting too far ahead of themselves. Sean McDermott has evolved so much over the last 5 years, both personally and professionally. He took the field goal at the end of the game, but it was the right decision this time around, other than the conservative decision. But he is not afraid to trust his guys and go for it on a 4th and 4 if he's feeling it in the moment. He's got an analytics guy. They learn from that part to where he says, okay, Matt says yes, Matt says no, and if it says yes, Sean, you make the final call. All of these different elements. Josh Allen has played the best year of his life. The defense is getting to a point where they are playing the best football of their season right now. So if it doesn't happen this year, whew, man, what a story it's going to be here in Buffalo if it doesn't happen this time.
Yeah, I'm hoping Bedford eventually gets out of concussion protocol and stuff. That's a very good one. All right, let me end with this. This is and I appreciate your time. I don't want to take too much because you guys one of the things that's changed over the course of our careers is that the beat reporter no longer has one job, and that is to fill content for the newspaper, right? Or like, let's even extend it to a web thing. It's fill content for the web. Like, there's an expectation, I think, from your readers that you're on social media, right, and sending them stuff during a game. There's expectations for The Athletic that, you know, on top of whatever you're going to write after the game, maybe you guys are part of a live blog as well, that you have to sort of do sort of live stuff. So, Nate, I want to, because I'm sure there are young people who would like to get into the business who are listening, like how do you approach Sunday in-game? And, like, is it sometimes too much or too much of an overload to sort of serve all these...
Watch out. Vehicle on shoulder ahead.
Too much of an overload to sort of serve all these kind of masters at once. Because once upon a time, your only job might have been literally, you know, follow the game, watch the game, go to the locker room, then come back up, write some story, and you're done. But today, like, if you're not tweeting, if you're not on X or Blue Sky or whatever, sort of feeding the Chiefs reporter piece, well, they're going to go to somebody else, and maybe then they subscribe to that other place, and that place gets the money. So I wanted to get a sense from you, Joe, because I know both you guys are working extremely hard on those game days, and it's not just following the game anymore. It's doing a lot of different things. So take it from there.
Yeah, I'm so happy you explained it that well, Richard, because sometimes it's hard for me to remember everything, right? I do want to say before I give an answer that, like, if there's any young person that wants advice or tips to, like, improve themselves or better understand the industry that is for journalism, particularly from a writing standpoint, I'd be happy to, you know, answer those questions. So, you know, I'm very easy to find on the internet. It's by Nate Taylor. It's the same as it is in the Athletic. So I always want to encourage people that, like,
watch out. Vehicle on shoulder ahead.
Athletic. So I always want to encourage people that, like, yeah, there was a lot of people that taught me growing up, and, you know, it's obviously a thing that I want to continue. I have covered 6 straight AFC Championship games, so I thank the Lord I do have experience, right? So it never feels as, I remember the first time I did it in 2018, they were playing the Patriots. Of course, I gave it to overtime. I remember thinking, like, almost like, okay, like, this is too monumental, you know, like things are happening too fast. Like, it's another 3rd down and 10 conversion. So where now, you know, you want to get better every year when you get to these, like, sizable games. And so I take a lot of notes, you know, whether they're used for the live blog or not. That's kind of like our editor's discretion. But I'm trying to feed that as much as I can of just, like, insightful stuff, not necessarily play by play, but, like, hey, this matters because of this, or this is interesting because it's a new wrinkle. Hey, Steve's like, no, well, guess what, kids? He blitzed on 3rd down. You know, here's why it's successful. Here's why it failed. You know, I think for social media, this was something I learned from Howard Beck, who covers the NBA. He used to work at the New York Times. When the moments get bigger, you actually don't want to tweet is what I was told. So, like, I will go up right about until halftime. I'll, you know, have a Ask Me Anything sort of session during halftime. I'll answer those questions, give some insight, some advice. By the way, look out for this in the second half, da-da-da-da. And then about the 3rd quarter, I just stop tweeting, because now, if the game is close, I really do need to focus on, like, what is the differentiator of win or loss. You know, I don't try to talk to editors, or my editor specifically, a ton during the game, so I want to hear his perspective afterwards. Like, I don't want him necessarily, like, influencing my thoughts. So we kind of meet sort of, you know, basically while I'm in the elevator going down to the locker room, we'll obviously do some exchanging back and forth on the slide, just so I have a better plan before we go into the locker room, because there's like a 10-minute cooling off period for the players. And yeah, you just want to provide as much context as you can that's relevant and accurate. You want to determine what's the most important thing for that game, for the reader that particular day, because that's your focus. At least that's my focus. And then, because it's so great hearing, like, Joe talk about, like, the story arc of the Bills, because I have to do a very similar thing with the Chiefs, you know. I will start thinking of possible leads Saturday, like the day before the game, whether they win, whether they lose, like, what are some options that summarize the season or push the season further in a way that I'm just mindful of, so that I'm not starting from, like, screen to scratch. So hopefully that answers your question. But it's really fun to know there's 6, like, I kid you not, there's only 6 minutes on the clock on Sunday. You do not know who the team's going to be, right? And those 6 minutes matter so much. And you've been there the entire step of the way, so you better get it right. That's just what I tell myself.
And in particular with this game, they matter so much to so many people. Joe, I will give you the last word again. It's the same thing. So when we're in game, you get a lot of responsibility. And in fact,
Nate says he does a halftime Q&A. I do a pregame Q&A because I know at halftime I need to, beef up on food so that way I'm ready to go for the rest of the day, because that's really the only time, like those 7 minutes to go to the bathroom and to go there. That's the only time you have to yourself for the rest of the time, and to really think about what just happened in the first half too. So I'm kind of in a zone that way. I don't tweet as much as I used to during the games, only because and this is the competitive side of me, I don't want people to know what I'm thinking about.
Watch out. Vehicle on shoulder ahead.
I want people to know what I'm thinking about. And if, I'll put a bunch of stuff out there before the game, but, I have a particular process during the game where I am taking notes on every single play about who's out there, who's not, how many yards. I'm taking real-time stats, so that way I have a bank of stuff that I can draw back to and look for trends. And I save it in my iCloud. So in that 10-minute cool-off period, I'm looking at this stuff to see if anything stands out. And of course, you sense it as the game goes along. But I'm balancing a lot of those responsibilities. So when there's a break, if there's a TV timeout, great, let me get over to the live blog and hammer out a 75-word thing real here. So that way I've got that part of it going. The stuff I will tweet about most will be like what I'm sensing in the crowd and stuff like that, and injuries, the pertinent things where, tangible that you can go back to. But mostly I'm serving the audience on the live blog, and then I want to serve my readers, subscribers, podcast listeners, whatever. I want to serve them with my full brain of what I have been interpreting through that entire 60-minute game, and sometimes more than that. To be able to, we know, to be able to serve them something that they can learn, something that they weren't thinking about in the game. Because broadcast, it feels like every single game, there's like a certain 5 amount of things that people think because of the game, because of what they see on the broadcast. Sometimes you have to delve into those because it is the story. But other times, it serves you so much better from my experience that if you pivot from that and find a unique part of it and kind of maybe fast forward it or take it back to something you sensed earlier in the season, then that is worth its weight in gold. So that's my typical process throughout the game. I'm not super sociable when it comes to in the game, because I'm usually I'll say things out loud just so I remember them as I'm taking notes. But that's pretty much it. And trying to find the angle to be able to do it. And this will be the second AFC Championship game I cover. I'm not like Nate. This is going to be the second go round for me. But I at least do have a bank of experience from the first one, because even though it was COVID year, I did travel for that one, and we didn't travel at all that season. So I know what it's like, to a certain degree. But finding that angle in a game that people are going to be consuming so much, if you can find just a little piece of something, why the game unfolded the way that it did, like I said, it's worth its weight in gold.
Nate Taylor is the lead reporter for The Athletic when it comes to the Kansas City Chiefs. He has covered that team since 2018. Joe Skye is the lead reporter covering the Buffalo Bills. He's covered that team since 2010. They will both be in Kansas City for what could be the game of the year in the NFL. That game will be broadcast by CBS at 6:30 on Sunday. And if they do peer to the press box, those dots will be Nate. Those dots will be Joe. I'll talk to CBS.
It's high up, so make sure you look really, really, really up in the sky.
Between shots of Taylor, Swift, and Caitlin Clark, I'll see if CBS can give you guys some love. Guys, I really appreciate this. I'll be reading. I'm not asking you for predictions, by the way. You can go read them if you want in The Athletic. But I'll be reading both of you guys. I'm not bullshitting you here. The reason why I'm with you guys, you guys do a phenomenal job. If and when The Athletic eventually cans my ass, I will still be paying so I can read both of you too. You guys are really, really good at what you do. And I appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for joining me on the Sports Media Podcast.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
House with Kevin McCarthy to help us know what to look for between now and the end of the first 100 days of the new second Donald Trump administration. Welcome, Mr. Speaker. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. It's been wonderful to see you on television, and I actually saw you at the inauguration, except you were there in person, and the rest of the world was watching on television.
Okay, this is for just the geeks who want a different, like an odd answer to a question. When President Trump was inaugurated 8 years ago, I was the very last person who was with him before he walked out. I had the selfie where I'm in the tunnel. I get announced, and then he's announced and walks out. And then in this inaugural, that being the former speaker, I'm the first person to come out. So I have the first and the last that's coming out.
Well, you got the Bible covered, because I think the Bible says the first shall be last. I think did you have to sit by Boehner during the inauguration?
Well, I had Debbie Boehner in between, but I had Boehner, and then I had Newt, and then Heather Foley, the wife of former Speaker Foley, was there.
Okay.
Those were the formers. What was funny too is, so we got pretty good seats, and people walked by, all the members would sit back the other way. But you could have a direct shot of former President George Bush. He is the most animated, and when he sees people, he talks to you through his facial expressions. When he sees Boehner, he takes a little, he acts like he has a cigarette. As we all know, Boehner still smokes to this day. Had to do a smoke break before we walked in, right? He was probably one of the most likable men.
I'll tell you what else Boehner does. He still cries too, because I had the over-under at 6 on the number of times that Boehner would cry during the inaugural service, and I think during the national anthem alone, he may have cried 6 times. So I lost a lot of money on that. Did you lose any handkerchiefs?
No, we were talking in that little room right before you walk in Statuary Hall where the speaker's office is. So I was talking to the Prime Minister of Italy, and then we had the President of Argentina. But Boehner and I were talking for a little bit about the job as Speaker, and he had to do a lot of ceremonies. And he's telling me one where they had given a congressional medal to some golfers like Jack Nicklaus and something. And I was going to be good the whole time. I wasn't going to cry. And then Jack started to cry, and I lost it. And as he's telling the story, he starts to cry again.
He's a sweet-natured guy.
He is. Anytime you talk about education or children, look, right, he has these 2 grandsons. And he had taken them out, and he was showing me pictures of his grandsons. He's a very proud grandfather.
He once spent a lot of time outdoors with those grandsons, because he looked like he had been living on the equator. We're in January, and everybody is pale, and then you get to Boehner, and there's a reason we call him Tan Man.
It's so funny. I'm not going to say who, but there's a prominent person in the media texts me during it and says, "You're from California. You look pale next to Boehner."
Well, everybody looks pale next to Boehner. All right, enough about John Boehner. You've had every position you can possibly have. Speaker, I get questions all the time, and I want to be respectful in how I answer them, but there's so much public misapprehension, misunderstanding about particularly what happened on your watch when you were the Speaker, the efforts to get appropriations bills to the floor, who killed those bills. It wasn't the enemy, it was your own teammates who kept you from getting some bills to the floor. Walk us through how it's supposed to work, and then mention what gets in the way of it working.
It sounds like inside baseball, but every single year, Congress is supposed to pass 12 appropriation bills. That is the funding of government, the military, the agriculture, the interior, the administration. So everything you think of government. Now, this isn't the mandatory spending, the Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. That's automatic. That's mandatory. This is discretionary. 12 bills. You have an appropriation committee. Every year they start out. They do their different hearings, and what you first have to do is what they call a top line number. How much will you spend this year? And these are negotiated. And when I did the debt ceiling, I capped how much we could spend, because they'll just keep spending a lot of money. And it was a really big victory. Cut us about $2.6 trillion. It really saves a great deal. So they know how much they can spend. Now they're going to figure out where they're going to spend it. And the appropriation committee works that all out, and then they're supposed to bring it to the floor. Now, this is the difference in the world. The minority party is not going to vote for any, because we as Republicans are trying to make them as most conservative as we can before they go to the Senate. And when I took over, we hadn't been doing these. The Senate wouldn't do any bills, and they'd wait till the last minute. They'd cram it all together right before Christmas, and then pass it, kind of like what they just did this last time. So I said, we're going to change all that. So once I did the debt ceiling, you got the top numbers, go do it. We work the bills, we made these great cuts, we bring them to the floor, and it's really the Republicans that have to pass it, because you want the most conservative to go to the Senate, so you have a stronger negotiation tool, because the Senate was, Democrats were the majority at the time. Well, there's this small group of people that try to say they're conservative, but what they are, they're kind of like an arsonist almost. They would stop us from passing those bills. Now, if those bills don't get passed, then you end up, the only option you have is a continuing resolution. Everybody says, let's shut the government down. It actually costs you more money, right? You're not paying your troops. It costs you more money when you do that. It hurts the military. And so there was one, it wasn't all the Freedom Caucus, because Chip Roy and Byron Donalds, they put a bill together. We were passing, we had like half of them already done, which was a big number compared to the past Congresses. But Matt Gaetz and a couple others wanted to create chaos. So they would vote, and as Nancy Mace too, they would vote against our bills going forward. And then we're getting pushed into a shutdown, and then they would vote against that. So they put you in a position where the Democrats have more power. which it's an inside baseball game, and they go outside and say, I'm the most conservative, which it ends up making people spend more money. Because if you look today, the real hard part for President Trump is they never passed the funding bills from last year. I put caps by doing the debt ceiling. Now they're talking about breaking the caps and having more money. What you really want is, and this is where you were so good, Trey, you were one of the most conservative members, but what you were able to do is, in these appropriation bills, if you're able to pass them, you're able to put what are called riders, right? Where all these things where you're listening to President Trump do executive orders like there's only two genders, male and female, you can put that in appropriation bills. You can go in and talk about your pro-life positions, and you can put those in. You can tell the military that they can't kick people out if they don't take the vaccine. But when you don't, you can't do that. That is the power of having a majority in the House with a Democrat president. We would be able to repeal the IRS agents. But then when you have a small group of 5 to 10 people, I mean, I remember Hannity getting really mad at these people because he saw what we were able to do. And then when they put us in this jeopardy, we went and put a really conservative continuing resolution to keep the government open, make all these cuts. The ones who voted against appropriation bills that put us into the shutdown wouldn't even vote for that. So then you wonder, why do they even run for office? Because what their end result is, they're making government spend more, be dysfunctional, and giving more power to Biden.
So you refer to it as inside baseball, but I think you did a really good job of explaining just how incongruent it is for members to blame speaker leadership for not passing individual appropriations bills when they themselves are the ones who voted against bringing those appropriations bills to the floor. That is not inside baseball. That's just flat out hypocrisy. You mentioned 12 subcommittees on appropriations. We call them the Cardinals. If you were the chair of those subcommittees, can you explain the interaction between the Budget Committee, which is important? You have Jody Arrington there now. Former Speaker Paul Ryan was chairman of the Budget Committee. The interaction of the Budget Committee with appropriations. What's the difference between the two? Because I think most people maybe don't understand budget versus appropriations.
That's a great discussion. But there's one other thing people have to understand. There's a lot of other committees like Armed Services. And there's two things people should think about. There's authorizing and appropriating. So this is saying this is what Defense Department should do. That's authorizing. But then the appropriators decide what to pay for. So you can authorize anything, but it won't come into fruition unless you decide this is how much money. This is my Christmas list authorizing. This is how much money I have to spend on Christmas. So this is what I get. The budget is a little like that, okay? So the budget is the majority party goes out and says we need to pass a budget to put us under control for how much we're going to spend. And we don't do a budget for 1 year. You plan it out for 10 years. So you try to put yourself on a path to being balanced. Okay, we're going to spend this much this year, then the next year, and the next year. The difficulty is the budget never becomes law. It just passes the House and the Senate. It doesn't really go to the president. And it's just like it's an agenda. I want to get this done, but you try to hold yourself to it. The problem is it never ties one Congress to the next, because that's what was so important in the debt ceiling by putting those caps on future Congresses that they can't spend more. Getting that agreement, it is the best ability for self-control. And what the Republicans did, like under Jody Bush, tried to do under Jody Arrington and others, will pass a budget, you'll say it's not balanced today, because you can't really balance it because we're so far out of whack. So you look at a 10-year window and say, not today, it's just like your own household. Can you pay off all your credit cards in 1 month? No, but I'm going to put a budget in my household where I spend less, pay down my debt, and you know what? In 5 years, not only will we have no more credit card debt, we'll have savings in our bank account. That's what we do with a budget. You look at the first year, but look all the way to the 10 years. And that's kind of our agenda and guide path to hold us. You know, if you want it really basic, it's like going bowling and you bring in young kids and you put up the bumpers. Don't get in the gutters, guys. Let's stay in a clear path. Let's get a strike and let's put ourselves into a balanced budget.
We'll be right back with more of the Trey Gowdy Podcast.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The new year brings new health.
Getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment.
Now you have the Budget Committee. They set the top line numbers. You have the other committees that say this is what we'd like, and then you have the Appropriations Committee that kind of fills in those numbers. And then you ideally want to bring every one of those individual 12 bills to the floor. And it's got to go through rules, I guess. The Rules Committee, which Virginia Fox was just to chair, and you had some good chairs when you were the speaker. But when your own team votes against your own rule, the other side never helps you pass rules. Own team. There used to be kind of an unwritten rule that you always voted for your own team's rules. What happened there? I mean, you had instances where your own teammates kept you from bringing your own bills to your own floor.
Yeah, just so everybody understands, a bill has to go through rules, and what they do in rules is they set the amount of time for debate. They set what amendments are available. And the interesting thing, I started bringing bills to the floor that anybody could offer an amendment, and you'd think, well, that's how it always is. That hadn't happened in like 10 years. Under Republican speakers and Pelosi speakers, no one had done that until I was able to do that. And anybody can. But what happens when you keep it wide open like that? People offer poison pills to try to make everybody get in a fight, make the bill fail. Then you go to the floor after the Rules Committee. It sets what amendments come up, set how much time for debate. If you don't have 218 and no Democrat's going to vote for it, you can't bring the bill up. So it totally stops. What's even worse is we had some people on the Rules Committee, Chip Roy one time, what is called somebody manages that rule, meaning you go down and you watch 2 members and they have 30 minutes and they debate this rule to come up and they explain it and then they call the vote and it comes to the vote. Well, if you're the manager of the bill, you're kind of the biggest supporter of it. Chip Roy managed the rule and then voted against the rule. So the basic rule used to be, if you were in the majority committee, you could vote with a party the floor over to the Democrats. And this is a
In 6.4 miles, take exit 265, State Highway 130 toll south towards San Antonio.
over to the Democrats. And this is a tactic that some in the Freedom Caucus thought was great because they got more attention. And, the interesting part is you can always find something wrong with a bill. I remember there was one very religious friend of mine. When I was the majority leader, we were working on a bill, and he said he needed certain things in it to really support it. We go out because you're saying never. And remember, our government is designed to have compromise. That's the way the founders. You can't have 100% of what you want, but it's kind of, if you take Ronald Reagan's approach, that I'm going to make it the most conservative, and you're putting yourself on a path to a better prosperity. You understand it. But if you just say no, you literally turn everything over to the Democrats.
I call it self-sabotage or self-hatred. And it's really why the Republican Party sometimes just does better in the minority, because you can just literally vote no on everything in the minority when you're in the majority.
Exactly.
I think you won the majority 2 or 3 times when you were in leadership. I mean, you always picked up. I don't ever recall you losing the majority as a speaker. But when you
as leader, another little fact, I'm the only leader that has always gained seats.
Okay.
Even when Republicans lost, we gained it. You were right, Trey.
Well, that doesn't happen very often. So no, I was there plenty of times where you wish something had been in the bill or you wish something had not been in the bill. But when perfect is the enemy of good enough, then you're not going to stay in the majority very long. So let's talk about some of the, I don't want to belittle mental health issues because they're real, and I saw them as a prosecutor, and many of us have family members or friends that struggle with issues. But when you're in Congress, they're a lot easier to see. So you have these people that, for instance, they're people that you helped get elected. You spent a lot of money helping them to get elected. They would never have been reelected without your help, and yet they turn on you for reasons like, I want a balanced budget today. I want you to explain to our listeners what it would take to balance the budget in 1 year and how impossible it is.
I'll put it very simplistic. So if you take your household income, how much you bring in, say you make $50,000 a year, but you're spending $120,000. So you have to borrow that extra money. So if you want to balance it, you have to cut everything out. So if we cut all of defense, all of the congressional pay and everything else, the budget wouldn't be balanced. You'd have to take money from Social Security and others. So what you want to do is, and it would just send shockwaves into a deep depression that you would never get out. But you don't want to continue living that way. So the first thing you go in a household like this is, what are we wasting money on, right? So we're not going to take a family vacation because we've taken family vacations, but we didn't pay for it. We borrowed them for the future, where the future has now come, right? Well, maybe we make our coffee at home and go instead of going to Starbucks, right? Maybe we don't need the couple extra cars and we cut back. Maybe we go and search and the credit cards and the interest rates are too high. We negotiate them lower. We put them all into one and get a lower rate and focus on paying them all. You start scrimping and actually acting like this is your own money. That's the way you have to do in government. And you know what? Why don't we start looking? Is there like a lot of government buildings that aren't filled? Do we really need them? Well, why don't we sell those, because that's an asset, and pay down the debt? Why don't we go about making government more efficient? Because technology's out there, and we can perform a better service to our consumers by using technology that gives us the ability to answer questions and others faster instead of slowing things down. So you would treat it like your own household income. You would sell the excess assets, pay your debt down. You'd stop spending, going out to dinner every night. You'd start cooking at home. This is how you'd have to go about doing it. But you would put yourself on a path that you wouldn't have to live this way every day, right? So you do this for a couple of years. Now you have a balanced budget, but now you're putting money in savings and you're investing. So when your kids are ready to go to college, you don't have to borrow for it. You have it. That is the world in which we should be living. And that's the world we can. But because this is other people's money, and because everyone won't play together, they actually borrow more money than that comes in to the coffers every year. And then there's a disaster. Well, we got to pay for that. There's COVID. You know what we should do? Because COVID, the economy's going to do bad. We're going to give everybody money. We're going to spend more money in government, but it's just going to be temporary. Well, you know what? It's not temporary, because they never lowered that. That's what we fought for. And inside the debt ceiling was the greatest in the history of Congress, that we had appropriated money that was not spent. That we actually...
In 1 mile, exit right to exit 265, State Highway 130 toll south towards San Antonio.
That was not spent. That we actually pulled it back. It's called a remittance. Never before in American history have we ever pulled so much money back. Because I had gone to Biden. You wouldn't think you'd have to fight about this. During COVID, they appropriated a lot of money. COVID was over, but they still have these billions of dollars sitting out here that people could use. The COVID's over, so why would you use it? That would just be wasting money. So we voted to pull that money back, not to spend it, and put it back into our savings. But that was a major fight I had to go through to do that. Why wouldn't you do that in your own household?
All right, so if I understood you correctly, so for us, like if I were to do a poll right now of our listeners and say, okay, raise your hand if you want to balance the budget tomorrow, a lot of hands would go up. Because
use the right 2 lanes to exit right to exit 265, State Highway 130 toll south towards San Antonio.
a lot of hands would go up. Because in theory, we all want to do that. When we explain campaign that you were talking about not just cutting out all discretionary spending, but cutting Social Security benefits, cutting Medicare, and cutting defense spending. Then all of a sudden people say, well, I don't necessarily want to do it in 1 year. I mean, it's impossible to do it in 1 year. You've racked up $30-something trillion in debt, and you want to get rid of that in 1 year. So when we see politicians on television talking about balancing the budget in 1 year, they're either delusional or they're just lying to their constituents. Those are the two options I see, but you're more charitable than I am. Is there some other option I'm missing other than mental health, or you're just disingenuous?
They're really disingenuous. And this is the thing all your listeners need to understand. Last year, we spent more money on the interest on our debt than we did on our defense. Remember, we spent more than $900 billion a year, almost $1 trillion on defense. We spend more than that on interest. That means our credit card has gotten so high, we're not even making the payment, right? We're not paying anything into principal. We're making the minimum payment of just the interest. Any household like that, you know they're on a path. This is where Dave Ramsey comes in and says, you're going to sell all your cars and ride a bicycle to work, right? You are on a path to destruction if you don't do something. This is where we are as a government. So when someone stands up to you and says we're going to balance in a year, they're not being honest with you, or they don't know the facts. What they're really...
Continue straight for 8 minutes to exit 423, US 79 toward Taylor and Round Rock.
They don't know the facts. What they're really doing is they want attention, and they probably want to raise money online. You can see members like that do this all the time. It's all attention about themselves. And it's sad, not people always, and they're not all like that. There are really good people in Congress. And you know, too often we say, oh, we just hate our government, we hate our people. No, I want the very best people in Congress. I don't want them to spend their lifetime. I love that Trey Gowdy ran for Congress. You were such a great voice, especially for those who didn't have one. I could recall the things you said on the floor on certain bills where you would bring people to tears on both sides of the aisle. That it wasn't partisan. It was just an experience that you had seen as a prosecutor of how to change a law so there wouldn't be another victim, that you would have some protection. And that is what you want, right? You go and you serve, you use your expertise, and you put a better place to leave it for the next generation. But with the world of the internet and the world of television and people, they're in Congress, well, I want to be governor. I think I would get more attention. So they'll go take a position that they haven't had before because it's the position of the day. It's about a bathroom or something, and they had a different position before, and they start rallying up, or they say they hurt themselves and they put their arm in a sling for one day to get attention, and they think they're going to raise money off that, or they'll dress and they'll put a letter on their shirt or something to try to get attention. Those are the people you should be afraid of. Those are the people that are not working for you.
And one of those people would not have been in Congress but for the plaintiff pleadings for you to help her get elected. And no one raised more money than you did. And I think about what I know you don't like to talk about it, but I think about what you missed in your own household, your own home, because you were out raising money for other people. And then I think about some of those other people being the ones that voted to replace you as speaker. And so when I hear words like character and principle,
Watch out, vehicle on shoulder.
hear words like character and principle, it just makes me laugh. You don't have any character if you're going to do that. If you're going to lie about the president, if you're begging for money on one hand, and then 6 months later you make up a list of grievances. When I heard, who's a guy from California that's now singing happy 18th birthday on Cameo? I can't remember his name. No, he's from Florida, but he lives in California. Gates. So when I hear Gates complaining about this appropriations process that we just went through, that Speaker McCarthy did not bring appropriations bills to the floor when it was his own friends that kept those bills from coming to the floor, I just wonder sometimes how many people know that.
Well, Matt Gaetz is a special case because, you know, the ethics report just came out. I mean, he spent his whole career in Congress trying to make this ethics report not come out. But I learned something in this that I didn't know before. And so, as Speaker, you work with your conference and you pick who's to be on committees, right? But there's one committee I never talked to them, and you served on this committee, right? The Ethics Committee. And it has an equal number of Republicans and Democrats, and they're responsible for investigating members of Congress. So I don't have any say over it. They could be investigating me or anything else. Now, unbeknownst to me, and now that I read this ethics report, I really found out what drove Matt Gaetz to make a motion to vacate. Because on April 27th, Manu of CNN asked Matt Gaetz, what grade would you give Speaker McCarthy as Speaker? He says an A. And you have to understand, in January, he didn't want me to be Speaker. He voted against me 15 times. He never voted for me. And then he watched me be Speaker. He gave me an A on April 27th. Well, in the ethics report, I now learn ethics sent him a letter on May 23rd. Never talking to me. I don't know he gets a letter about this investigation. And what happens in that case, Matt Gaetz then goes to the floor. I don't know this. And he gets a couple other people on a Monday, and he stops the bill from being passed. And he's very upset, and I don't know. And I'm meeting with a couple members the next day, and Dan Bishop says it's because you put an ethics investigation against Matt Gaetz. I said, what are you talking about? I didn't know nothing about this. And then lo and behold, Matt comes up to me later, trying to get me to stop an ethics. I said, Matt, I don't know anything about it. I can't do anything about it. You say you didn't do anything wrong. Just give him the information, because I'm not going to give him any information. Well, this is when Matt starts talking to a couple other people. get a little group of them to stop the appropriation bills from coming forward. They make up every excuse possible, right? We make them the most conservative, we get the greatest writers, it's never ever good enough. Well, unbeknownst to me, now that I read the ethics report, the ethics committee gives Matt an extension to respond to their questions. You know when Matt responded to their questions in just a couple pages? October 2nd. The exact same day he puts in a motion to vacate, thinking he can use that to influence me to go do something illegal and go to the ethics committee and say, stop looking at Matt. And then find out later, he resigns from Congress 2 days before he thinks the ethics committee is going to come out with a report, because he thinks that would kill the ethics committee. So it wasn't until this all came out. And when it came out, yes, he did sleep with underage women. He paid more than $100,000 for them. He took drugs and supplied drugs to them. So he was willing to lose the majority, waste the Congress to try to protect himself. That's when you get the sociopaths in Congress, and people don't know that.
Hang on a second. So you're telling me that if I lay the ethics committee from a chronological standpoint next to a calendar, you can actually track. First of all, I mean, I'm not on social media, as you know. He gave you an A, which
April 27th.
Okay, I didn't get any of those in school, but that's the highest grade you can get, right?